Hello, and welcome to the bedroom floor. I'm your host JAMm, and 2022 was arguably one of the best years for gaming. I feel like everyone had something new and exciting to play last year, so to celebrate that, I'm going to talk about 2022 in games. Now, to make a few things clear, I won't be able to cover every single game or every important piece of news from the year. I'm just going to cover everything that I consider to be important or notable. So with that out of the way, starting us off this year, we saw Take-Two Interactive putting in a $12 billion offer to buy Zynga. Zynga, who are best known for making Farmville, were somehow at the center of the biggest deal in gaming history. Days later, Microsoft announced its intent to purchase Activision Blizzard for $69 billion, which is like, damn, didn't need to overshadow them that much. This year continued on the trend of mega corporations consuming other corporations for billions, and Sony wanted in. So they decided to fire back at Microsoft with a $3 billion purchase of Bungie. But all of that is nothing compared to the heat the New York Times brought with its acquisition of the hit web browser game Wordle. Remember Wordle? If you don't, I don't blame you. It was a web browser game where your goal was to guess the daily 5-letter word within 6 guesses. Every time you got a right letter in the right place, it would appear as green. If the letter was in the word but in the wrong place, it would be yellow. And if it wasn't in the word, it would be blank. January was the month of the dual boom. We saw a lot of Wordle-like games appear this month, such as Hurdle, Nerdle, Quirtle, Squabble, and Sonic Hurdle, which is a spin-off of a spin-off. The dual rabbit hole goes deep. This month is a massive month for PC games, with the critically acclaimed God of War 2018 coming out onto PC. But for me, the biggest release of the month was easily Pokemon's Legend Arceus. That game was the first time the Pokemon formula was truly changed in a mainline experience, and it was so refreshing to play. Easily a highlight of the year for me. February was a pretty massive month for gaming. Valve released the Steam Deck to much fanfare, the Cuphead show came out on Netflix, and the Uncharted movie starring Spider-Man also came out this month. We also saw Nintendo buy SRD, who has helped develop games for Nintendo since the NES port of Donkey Kong. Also this month, we saw people in the gaming industry get upset when people were enjoying the highly anticipated game Elden Ring. February was a pretty stacked month in regards to game releases. There were a few big titles that came out this month, one of the biggest being Horizon Forbidden West, also known as the game that came out just before Elden Ring. The Horizon series really can't catch a break. Its prequel game launched when Breath of the Wild came out, so naturally a lot of memes about the game being shoved out of the spotlight were made. Anyways, Game of the Year, also known as Elden Ring, came out this month, and from what I've heard, it's a fantastic experience. I haven't played it yet because I'm not a massive Souls fan, but god damn does it look great. March was a pretty weird month for gaming news. We saw Netflix buying 2 mobile game developers, Sony marked interest in purchasing Haven Studios, making that the first Canadian-based team for Sony, and Epic Games bought the music streaming service Bandcamp for some reason. But that's not the only thing Epic did. Fortnite Chapter 3 Season 2 came out this month, and it was war-themed. Some people thought this was a rather insensitive move, as the war in Ukraine had just started a few weeks prior. So, for a few weeks, Epic Games said all profits from Fortnite would go to relief in Ukraine. In 9 days, $100 million was raised. March had a lot of companies doing very similar things to try and help with the war and crisis that was and still is taking place in Ukraine. March was a lot less big in comparison to February for game releases, but a lot of great games came out this month. Valve reminded everyone that they make games sometimes with After Death's job. Gran Turismo 7 came out, and it wasn't a PS5 exclusive for some reason, but the best game on this list is easily Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I adore Kirby, and with this being his first proper 3D game, I would argue the team smashed it out the park with this one. Truly a must-have game for Switch owners. April didn't have a massive amount of big news, but there was talks about how horrible the development of the new LEGO Star Wars game was. This month stank. The new LEGO Star Wars game came out, and so did the horror stories of the work conditions. The critically acclaimed The Stanley Parable got a sequel, and Wii Sports 4 came out, without golf for some reason. Yeah, I don't really understand why golf was the game that had to be in the winter update, especially considering that golf isn't really played in the winter season, but you know what, Nintendo? You do you, bub. In May, we saw Embracer Group offer to purchase the assets of Square Enix Europe, as well as Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, and Square Enix Montreal, along with those companies' IP. Also in May, we saw EA break up with FIFA from 2024 onwards, after nearly 30 years of their partnership, and QA testers at Ravensoft formed a union. You know this month was rough for games when there are multiple Stadia ports listed. Besides Given Beyond the Trees, there wasn't a lot of great games that came out this month. There was the controversial Ni no Kuni Crossroads. This game is basically Genshin Impact, but inside of the world of Ni no Kuni. From what I've heard, the game practically plays itself, but it's nice to see Genshin have some competition. Besides that, Ubisoft released their version of Rocket League to an overwhelming meh, and Pac-Man released a new game. I wonder what it could be. It's just Pac-Man again! If you want Pac-Man, you can just do this. Don't let them know I showed you this. The biggest piece of news that happened in June was that E3 didn't happen, but Summer Games Fest did, and I'll be completely honest, I forgot that this happened. Here are some of the bigger bits of news to come from that. Street Fighter 6 was announced, Xbox Game Pass is now on Samsung Smart TVs, Resident Evil 8 got its DLC announced, and Goat Simulator 3 was announced, the official sequel to Goat Simulator. Besides that, the most controversial mobile game in existence came out this month, that being Diablo Immortal. The game came out being borderline pay to win. I remember seeing headline after headline talking about how anti-consumer this game was. With someone spending 100k to max out their character to then face the consequences of their actions as they couldn't play the game because their level was too high. All things considered, June was a pretty solid month for game releases. Ignoring Diablo Immortal, we saw Resident Evil 2, 3, and 7 get ported to next-gen consoles, Neon White came out this month to a lot of praise, Amora came out for consoles, Fall Guys went free to play, which was pretty hype, Sonic Origins came out, and depending on who you ask, that game is either great or just okay. Portal came to Switch, and after years of waiting, Cuphead finally got its DLC. July was a pretty big month for Nintendo as they announced they were buying an animation studio as well as shutting down the Wii U and 3DS eShops. This announcement sucked as the Wii shop shut down a few years ago, so it sucks to see its successor go not too long after its demise. In some more positive news, Sony announced that it was buying the esports platform Repeat GG. While this month had less notable releases compared to other months, the games that did come out were pretty good. Klonoa finally got some love after years of neglect. One of my favorite games of the year, Stray, came out this month, as well as Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which is apparently pretty solid from what I've been told. August saw the Pokemon World Championship happen in London, which was the first time it was held anywhere but North America, which is pretty cool. This month had something in a similar vein to Summer Game Fest, that being Gamescom. Gamescom, which did happen, was just okay. Return to Monkey Island was announced along with new Tales from the Borderland, Sonic Frontiers and Dead Island 2 got release dates, and the PlayStation equivalent to the Xbox Elite controller was announced. Also in this month, Sony bought mobile game developer Savage Games. This month was pretty wild for game releases. Call of the Land came out this month to much praise, Spider-Man came out on PC, Multiverses was a game, the Saints Row reboot happened, and Nintendo decided to make their own version of Fall Guys. September had the Tokyo Game Show happen. Deathloop stopped being a timed exclusive for the PS5 and launched on Xbox, meaning the PlayStation 5 has 4 games. Google announced the death of its cloud streaming service Stadia, which is the most predictable thing that could have happened this year. However, the biggest bit of news from this month was the GTA leaks. 90 videos of an unannounced GTA game were leaked to the public, and people didn't like it because it didn't look finished. No, duh, it didn't look finished! The early version of a game was leaked and it didn't look finished? Who would have guessed? But because of this, we got to see a lot of early versions of other games, as developers stood in solidarity with Rockstar. I love how Sea of Thieves were just little bean fellas, that's just adorable. This month had a lot of games, so here are the big ones. The Last of Us Part 1 came out again, this time for PS5, and it looks pretty good. Splatoon 3 released this month, and I love that game to death. Trombone Champ was a fun game to watch people play. Return to Monkey Island came out, Shovel Knight Dig, a spin-off to Shovel Knight, came out, and so did 2 sports games. To start off October, fandom bought GameSpot and Metacritic, along with a few other major properties. The second iteration of TV network G4 shut down a year after its relaunch, which is a real shame because Name Your Price and Hey Donna were actually pretty good. Netflix bought another game studio. Overwatch 2 had one of the worst launches in gaming history, and the original voice actress for Bayonetta called for a boycott of the third game after claiming they were only offered $10K for doing the voiceover work for the full game, which turned out not to be true. As the year goes on, so does the heat provided by the gaming industry. Starting off this month, Nier Automata came to Switch, No More Heroes 3 was no longer a Switch exclusive, Scorn was a game that some people like, Mario & Rabbids crossover franchise is a gift that keeps on giving, Persona fans were finally able to play their favorite Persona game for the first time, and Bayonetta 3 didn't really get boycotted. That was a really weird drama. November saw the newly acquired Square Enix Montreal getting shut down 3 months after being purchased from the Embracer Group. The Game Awards put out their votes for Game of the Year, among other things, and people were not too pleased about what did and didn't make the cut. But what else is new? Nintendo put out an apology for how bad Pokemon Scarlet and Violet was, and there was also the whole Smash Bros. Panda Circuit drama. It was a very scummy move from Nintendo and Panda to basically force grassroots Smash tournaments to shut down, which is a real loss for everyone. This month was a pretty good month for game releases. Sonic Frontiers is the best Sonic game in recent memory. The sequel to the God of War reboot finally came out, and most people loved it. Spider-Man Miles Morales came out on PC, and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet released broken, but people like the gameplay loop, so it's got that going for it. December saw the Federal Trade Commission and the SEC looking to block Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard. This isn't the first time the deal has gone under legal challenges, but if this fails, we will see the deal go through. The Game Awards happened, and some kid came onto the stage and talked about Rabbi Bill Clinton after the Game of the Year was announced, which was just really cringe. Crystal Dynamics announced that Amazon Games was going to publish a Tomb Raider game, and Amazon Video announced that a God of War TV show is in the works. The Embracer Group had a pretty big month, as they also bought a Roblox developer and turned them into a Coffee Stain subsidiary. Also in December, Epic Games started giving out free games every day in December for a few weeks. Speaking of Epic Games, Fortnite and Epic Games were fined $500 million, and they will have to provide $250 million in relief funds to players. As it turns out, they were tricking players into buying items, collecting information on children without parental consent, and having default settings that actively harm children and teens. This month is probably the weakest month for game releases, all things considered, but that is to be expected as the industry gets ready for the next year. Something that was kind of cool was that Fortnite Chapter 4 was the first game to use Unreal Engine 5.1, which is all the cool fancy bells and whistles which make games look nice and easier to run. And we're finally done. Having looked back at everything, this was honestly a great year for gaming. A lot of massive games came out, and really, it's hard to complain. It feels like this year, everyone got something new to play. So, I hope you enjoyed looking back at the year with me. This has been The Bedroom Floor. I'm still your host, JAMm, and thanks for watching.